Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Ezekiel chapters 47 and 48 and looking at some of the things that we need to recognize or that we need to learn from these two chapters. Now, as first glance comes through, there's not a lot here to seemingly pull from because it's just the laying out of the divvying up of the land, so to speak, in this vision. But I want to pull back and I want us to look at a couple of different things in here as we try to solidify exactly what's being said and how it's being said in this particular passage. Remember, first of all, that this is a vision that goes all the way back to chapter 40, and that this is not a literal instance, but rather this is something that Ezekiel is given that he is told to tell to the children of Israel. Remember, the children of Israel are still in captivity. They've been in captivity for over 25 years at this particular point. And so God is giving them this message of hope. And in chapters 40 through 43, you have this picture of the temple. It's not going to be an exact picture of what the temple is going to look like when they return. It is not going to be the exact dimensions or the size of the temple in Zerubbabel's day, much less in Herod's day when he makes it a grandiose place once again. But it is going to signify to them that they are going to come back and they are going to worship in the temple once again, and that those things are going to once again be there. And then in chapters 44 through 46, you have the priesthood and the fact that the priests are going to have responsibilities. None of these are new. They are responsibilities that they have had since the time the law of Moses was given. And yet it's going to be a reminder of the things that the priests are going to be responsible for and the things that the priests are going to do and who God wants to be his priests when they return to the land of Israel. And then as you come into chapters 47 and 48, you have this divvying up of the land. And if you go through and you look at maps following the Israelites' return, you're not going to find anything that seemingly matches up to this. And that causes some people some consternation. So, what was it that God was saying? Well, first of all, remember it's a vision. Not everything in here is meant to be taken literally in all of its concepts. But there is an overarching message that is literal in its nature. And so let's see if we can see for just a moment what that is. When you come into chapter 47, you have a giving of the boundaries of the land of Canaan, or of the land of Israel. And God says they're going to come back into the land, but their boundaries are not going to be as big as what they were in the days of the peak kingdom of Israel, in the days of David, or things of that nature. The boundaries go from the Mediterranean Sea on the west, across to the north, just under Damascus, and then to the east along the Jordan River, and to the south along the river of Egypt, which is not the Nile, by the way, but along the river of Egypt to the area of Kadesh. And if you'll notice, in the days of Jesus, in the days of the first century and following, that's pretty much where the Jews lived in the land of Canaan at that particular time. They covered the regions of those areas. And so you have this delineation that is being given. Is it exact? No, it's not exact, but it's a rough estimate. It's a rough picture of where it is that they are going to return to when they come back from captivity. But then in chapter 48, you have this dividing up of the land in this vision. And this dividing up of the land is very weird and interesting and all at the same time kind of jumbled in some ways, because you have this listing from, as it calls, from east to west, but also from north to south, of the various tribes. And yet there's many ways in which it all seems to be compartmentalized into one city, that their return is all just going to be to one big city, is the way some people take it. And that's in some ways the way that it reads, is that from north to south throughout the land is all going to be one big city. I want you to notice a couple of things in this section that I think will help it to make a little bit more sense. Number one, you've got in this section a reiteration of all 12 tribes, including the Levites. And so all of the tribes of Israel are going to be included. And they're going to be included in a sense that was very much like the marching orders in the time of the wandering in the wilderness back in the book of Exodus and in Numbers, where they are told in what order they are to proceed and which group is supposed to be in front of the tabernacle and which group is supposed to be behind and how they're supposed to be camped and all of those various things. This is very similar in those areas. Now, if when the people return, they don't divvy up the entire land in 12 sections like what you have listed there. But here's the key. All 12 of those tribes are going to be represented. In other words, all 12 of those tribes are going to be back in Canaan. The emphasis of the message is not over the fact that each group is going to have a separate piece of land, a separate piece of real estate that is going to be their land as it was in the old days, but rather that all of them are going to be back, that there's going to be people from each of the tribes that is going to return. It's not just going to be one tribe, it's not just going to be one group. And where that becomes important is in the fact that the northern kingdom of Israel, which was the home of the 10 northern tribes, was taken into captivity over 100 years before the southern kingdom of Judah in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. And yet all 12 tribes not only still exist, but all 12 tribes are going to be represented in the return. Because when the northern kingdom was taken into captivity, there were those from each of the tribes that fled down to the southern kingdom and took refuge there. And so you have this recognition that it's not just going to be the tribe of Judah that returns. It's not just going to be the people of Judah that are going to be representative of the entire nation of Israel in the return, but rather that all of the people will return, and that Jerusalem will once again be their city. It will once again be the major city. Now, the dimensions of the city that are talked about in here, there's a lot of contest about the size of it because it's an enormous city, and depending upon how you measure the cubits and everything else, you could make the city basically be the entire land of Palestine itself. That being said, the point is not with the sizes that are given or things of that nature. Remember, in that sense, it's a vision. The message is you will go home. You will return to where it once was. And you will do what you once were supposed to do and should have been doing there. And you will have my blessing. That's the message of the final 8-9 chapters of the book of Ezekiel. And that's the message that God is trying to get across in chapters 47 and 48 with the divvying up of the land. It's not a literal sentiment of this much is going to be your land and this much is going to be your land, but rather that all of the people, all of the tribes are going to be represented there. And that's what you see in chapters 47 and 48. That brings us to the end of our studies in Ezekiel. Over the course of this year, we have gone through the books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And I hope that you've enjoyed the studies. I have certainly enjoyed going through and doing them with you. We don't plan to stop. We are going to take a couple of weeks for the conclusion of the season and begin again in January of 2020 with studies going through 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. And we're going to be doing some things a little bit differently in regard to that hopefully will improve things a little bit and maybe help a little bit as well. But we hope that you'll come back and join us in January, and we'll get details out as it gets closer. But in January, we will come back and we will begin studying through the books of Samuel and Kings. Until then, I hope you have a great end of the year, and Lord willing, we'll see you in 2020.